Today we will develop a new reference data items. We will like to develop new reference data items as an extension of the reference data library of post-scissor association. So we will use all the annotations, all the data representation rules used by in this library. To start with reference data creation, let's create a new data file, new data source for newly created items. We'll call it reference data library test. Now we can see a newly created data source, and we will see that all its annotations are really annotations as defined by the ISO, and these annotations are not used so far in PCA reference data library. So let's start editing annotations field, select all the annotations and delete them from the file. Now we will copy all the annotations which are in use in post-scissor association reference data library. We can copy them and then we will paste them into the appropriate field of the project, so that all the data sources created in our project will really receive exactly this set of annotations. Now we can start editing of the reference data library test data source. We will open it. It is empty now. We can check it by the empty search in the field. In the search field, we can see that this data source now has no entities. We will start by creating reference data item representing machine breakdown. You can check yourself that in PCA reference data library there is no really no machine breakdown class. Let's open PCA reference data library in a new panel so that we will have it at hand when we will do all the searches and establish all the relationships. Before we start editing, we will check one more thing. We will check the namespace for the new entities which will be created in our new file. By default, you can see namespace example.org reference data library RDL, or we can change it here. For example, let's make it RDL example.org data namespace. To start, we also have to define the same prefix which will be used in all URIs generated for new reference data items, the same prefix which was used in PCA reference data library. This is our dash prefix, so we will give a command in the console of an editor with active panel of our new file. We will give the command which will define exactly this prefix for all unique IDs which will be generated for new URIs, and execute this command. Now we can see the definition which we are going to use for the machine breakdown. It's a failure that prevents the system from working properly. And let's start by searching for the concept failure in the PCA reference data library. The research returns 69 entities. We can open this list and find a failure is here. Failure is a class of activity. We can check its definition and look that it's really appropriate superclass for our machine breakdown class. Failure is a class of activity, so we will create our new reference data item with the same type, class of activity type. We have to open the list of part 2 types in our project, open it as a tab in a new panel, and let's look for the class of activity. We start filtering, we find class of activity. Now we take class of activity with the mouse and drag it to the RDL test. Now we can enter the label of our class leave URI open so that the editor can generate it, and press OK. Check what we have created. We have created machine breakdown class with URI in the namespace which we defined previously, with fragment identifier starting with r-prefix, and with fragment identifier identical to the default RDS ID property which will be in future used by PCA reference data library and all federated reference data libraries as a unique identifier of all reference data items. We can now add more properties to the newly created entity. For example, let's add has designation value, which should be really identical to the label of a class. Let's now add a definition to the newly created item. For this we will have to choose has definition field and enter the definition of our new class. We can also add creation date, which is useful for future version management tasks, and we can also insert the name of the person who had created the reference data item. It has creator property, and put identifier of the person who had created it. Now we see the minimum number of properties completed for machine breakdown class of activity, and we can add one final relationship, the relationship between this new class of activity and failure class of activity, which was found in reference data library of post-user association. Required relationship is specialization relationship. So we'll go again to part 2 type list, filter specialization, take it and drop it at the head of the data tree in our new file. We do not need any label for the specialization relationship, so just press OK, and we can see that new relationship is created with URI and default RDS ID property only. When we open it, we will see error mark on the properties node saying that some roles are missing from our relationship. Let's fill the roles. Take machine breakdown class, drag it and drop it on the properties node. It is a subclass of our relationship. Press OK. Now let's take the failure class in the reference data library and drop it on the same properties node. It's a superclass. We choose the superclass role, press OK, and we see error mark disappearing. Now all the mandatory roles of the specialization relationship are filled. It has a subclass machine breakdown, our newly created class, and it has superclass failure from the post-user reference data library. Now the minimum amount of information for our new entity is present in the reference data library